There was another time when I was walking with the unit, and we came upon this road. We got on it, and it was me and 2 and 3, and right in front of us was like a Viet Cong. Came around, and we stood there. I don't know why they thought this, but I remember standing there, looking at these guys, and my thought was like, is this what it felt like at the OK Corral?
Ask a Vet is dedicated to documenting and preserving veteran stories in their own words on their own terms before their stories are gone forever. Each episode is an unfiltered conversation about who they were before service during war and their adjustment to coming home. If you believe these stories matter, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Your support helps us preserve the voices of those who served. Ask a Vet is proud to partner with Utah Honor Flight, part of the National Honor Flight Network, giving veterans the trip of a lifetime to Washington, D.C. to visit the memorials built in their honor. Every flight is free to veterans and made possible by generous donors. To learn more or support the mission, visit utahhonorflight.org or find your local hub at honorflight.org. And now back to the show.
Michael Ferris. I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. I was born in 1947 in June, which coming up I'll turn 79. So far, I think I outlived everybody in my family at this point, everybody. But, yeah, I went to school there. We moved out of Detroit. I ended up in a place called, on Michigan Avenue called Belleville High School. I went there. I quit 11th grade, and I went back, and I had to double team everything in my senior year. I told them, because I would end up in the military, let me get my high school diploma, and that kind of worked out. But we moved a lot as a kid. We had, as kind of family, like we I'd come home and all the furniture would be on the front lawn, and there'd be a note on the door, say we're at Aunt Betty's house, because, we got behind our rent and stuff like that. But anyway, I went to school. I finished up 11th grade. I quit. I went back. They took me in. I had to do summer courses and stuff like that. But I graduated, and I was going to go right into the military.
And you come from a military background, your dad?
Well, what it is, my family, everybody was involved in World War II one way or another. It was just constant in the sense that, my dad was in the Pacific. I had uncles that were at Normandy. Am I saying that right? Normandy landing?
Yep.
And one uncle was in 101st Airborne, my Uncle Ted. So I was telling you about that. When he hit the ground, he broke his leg, and he laid there for like 2 or 3 nights until, finally they got hooked up. And my other uncle, Uncle Reuben, went in. He was just basically infantry, and he went right in. And then my Uncle Richie, which is like my mother's cousin, he went in. He was like with the start of the CIA was called OSS, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what it was.
That's right. Yeah.
He was the kind when he came home, he was offered work in the CIA, what I remember of it, but he ended up working for the intelligence services in the corporations, the great big three, and because a lot of sneaky Pete stuff would go on. There would be people there, spying and, trying to figure out this and that. And he did very well with that. Uncle Ted, he went back to farming. He always walked with a funny limp, he drug his one leg. My Uncle Reuben, he lost a lung. He was shot and lost a lung. But he was like the peach of all the family. Everybody just loved him. He was from Germany, Jewish guy from Germany, and married into the Jewish side of our family. A lot of people don't realize back in the 50s, a lot of Jewish kids went to Catholic school. Everybody was now Catholic and stuff. And my grandmother just would never go to mass with us, for the longest time. And so one time as we got older, my stepfather had passed away and my grandfather passed away. So she lived with us. And I used to say, is Nani going to go to mass with us? No, she's not going to go. I said, she's always not going to go. But what happened, we started to go, we forgot something. I went into the house And just as I walked in, she's lighting up a Camel cigarette. And I said, Penny Mice, what are you doing? You know? And she said, don't tell your mother. Because she only thought she smoked Cools. Kools, right? And she's lighting up a Camel, and she throws me like 2 quarters, you know? And not to say nothing, 50 cents. But that was Stella, But anyway, we moved out, and after high school, my stepfather passed away, and it was June of 1966. It was August. He passed away. I graduated in June. August. So I was like the sole guy. I didn't go in. And then I volunteered for the draft after that. A year later.
Volunteered for the draft.
Yeah.
Describe that.
Well, volunteer for the draft means you can just get picked up right away, but I wanted to go full military. I mean, I'm the kind of thinker that if I want to do something, I'm going to go all out,
Okay.
So I signed up for 4 years in and 6 years, 2 years before and 6, which is basically the same thing when you do sign up. It's a way of getting around all the red tape, because I knew I had a heart problem when I was a kid. I got attacked by a German Shepherd, and I had not diabetes. I'm sorry. I had rabies.
Rabies.
I got rabies from the dog. And I know there was something wrong with me after that.
So skip back when you signed up.
Yeah, I signed up
in the Army?
Yeah, in the Army. Well, actually, yeah, and I was offered to go in the Marines. When I got in, I bumped into a friend of mine from high school. I knew him from high school. I knew his brother, his family, kind of. We weren't buds, but we became buds. And we went through all the training together. And I remember I was next in line, and the guy said, we need so many people to go to the Marines. And I said, can he go? And he said, no, you're the last one. I said, well, I'll stay with him. So we went through basic, we went through infantry, we went through jump school together. And
where did you do basic?
I did basic in Fort Knox, Kentucky. I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to say something about that, see if anybody remembers this. I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, which is where if I remember right, it's where all the tanks were. People used to say Elvis Presley went through there because he was a tanker. He was like, supposed to be like really good, but he went through there. I don't know if he did his basic there, but he was there. And anyway, we went through that, and I remember we had airborne school, jump school together. And I swear one day we all got called in, and I thought to this day, I even said to him about 2 years ago, I thought you were sitting right next to me when they offered us Pathfinder school. And he said, no, man, I just, because we were so close, No, I'm laughing because I remember one night we went out. Basic training hadn't even started yet. All right. And we still had our long hair and stuff. And we went out to the movies, which we were supposed to do. And just as we're coming around the corner, and we saw the DI going into the door. And I said, holy crap. We climbed in the shower room. All right. Took off all our clothes, except our underwear. Ran. Now you got to remember, this is the kind of thing where the toilets are all out, right? And there's no divider. There's no hiding. It's just everybody can watch you do what you got to do. I sat down, and I looked up, and there's Top looking down at us. He's like going like this. My mind's going, why is he looking at us like that? And I turned, and Rob sat right next to me. I said, Rob, you should have went 8 toilets down. Why are you sitting next to me for? We looked so much alike that they used to get us mixed up. You're an Allie. No, I'm Ferris. No, I'm Ferris. I'm not, because we had that similarity in the Italian look, But anyway, I went there, and
what was that like? What was boot camp like?
Boot camp, it was all right. It had its moments. There were a lot of people that had a hard time at it, a really hard time at it. And some people just, what I did though, I remember like when we got our haircuts, and the first week we were there, people were dropping out, not for the Army, but sick call. And I never experienced that, where you work out and you feel like you're going to vomit, throw up. And these guys are doing this. And these are like big, tough guys, man, But they just weren't trained and weren't working out. They weren't working out like before I went in, I was in martial arts, and I got, black belt and stuff. You see up there the picture. And I did all that stuff. I would jog all the time. The doc said, "Can I talk to you?" And I said, "Why? Why?" I said, "Well, your heart." And I said, "Look, I jogged like 4 to 5 miles a day. I'm a black belt in martial arts. I've done competitive kickboxing and stuff like that." So I said, "Go ahead and go." I said, don't do this to me. I don't want to walk out that door wherever I was in Detroit, and go home and say, they wouldn't take me, So he let me go, and the rest is history after that. But yeah, I was always behind the, I don't know how I would put it, but I was always seemed like I was behind when I really wasn't.
You're saying in boot camp?
Well, not even,
or you mean in school?
Just school
Yeah.
and life, education-wise, all kinds, But no, where was that? It was Fort Knox, Kentucky, where all the gold is at and stuff, And it was a nice place. And there was a lot of, good guys. But you got to remember, everybody were Vietnam vets. It just seemed like everybody went to Vietnam then. The DIs were Vietnam vets,
What did they tell you about it?
Oh, they tell you that they try to freak you out. You just sleep with one eye open. You make sure you do that. Make sure you stay. It was like every time you turn around, somebody's going to cut your throat. And I think I think a lot of veterans have experienced that you're going to go in there and somebody's going to do harm to you, because it's not the kind of war you think it is. It's not like your dad in World War II. It's not even like your dad in the islands, Okinawa and stuff, where everybody was together, 5,000 guys, It was thought that you're alone. You're by yourself. That's it. I mean, that's the kind of feeling you got. And I know when I came in country and I got off the plane, and everybody says this, and it's true, you get hit with this odor and the heat. It's like you just gone from one form of life into another. And
like almost like you're on another planet or something.
More like, yeah. In fact, being on another planet probably would have been better. But the thing is that, what it was like, and, and it all changed right then and there, and everything is like, hurry up, go, keep moving.
I want to stop. I want to back up a little bit. I want to kind of what you said earlier. You said you always felt like in school you were behind a little bit, everybody.
I was always.
Or do you feel like you weren't in boot camp?
No, boot camp. I was boot camp was the kind of physically, I was alive. When it came to like map training, forget about it. Remembering things, doing anything like that. Like I could have never. I even tried to do a sergeant's exam. I flunked that. No matter how much I studied. I'm probably the only guy that had flunked driver's ed. I did. I remember one time I did. I said I flunked, and I said to the girl, I said, "Look," she said, "You didn't pass it." I didn't pass. I said, "My wife's over there with my kids," So she said, "Well, you can take it again." So I did, but she kind of, and I don't know if I should say, it doesn't matter. She kind of gave me the answers, so I passed.
So, okay, so back up too. So when they offered you Pathfinder school.
Into that. One of the reasons why this is, some people believe it, some people don't. What I've come to understand, and what proved this to me one day, I used to tell my wife this, we were married. I said, they told us that we had a form of nocturnal vision. And she thought it was nuts. She said, "You're making that up. It doesn't make sense."
What do you mean by that? You could see good at night?
Yeah, and here's what happened. One time, we had sonar, like World War II. Japanese didn't. But they found guys that could stand on deck that had like a form of nocturnal vision, where they saw the night and things in the night differently than the average guy. So these guys were trained to do that stuff at night. All their training was at night, that kind of cleared it for me when I saw that like documentary one time where the vision, I don't know how that works. And I can't even describe. I mean, now it's different, I can't describe what it's like to me. When I look in the night, it's the night, that's how it is to me.
So, okay, what happened after that? You accepted to be Pathfinder?
Yeah, no, I did because they offered me, they said you, put your name on the list if you want to do Ranger School, which I know I would have done it physically. I would have no problem. That's what I'm going to say is like when I was in the military, I was so ahead of everybody physically, and that I was ahead of the game.
Yeah.
I remember one time we used to do those sticks as a stick,
to fight with.
Yeah, and this one sergeant, he just sometimes people have it out for people, and it seemed like people always had it out for me. But he took me when we were doing that training stuff. He put me with somebody, because I had weapons training in martial arts, the bow and the sai and stuff. And then he brings out 2 guys on me, and then 3. He took me up to 4 guys, and I still could take them out. So I mean, it's not like bragging or anything. I mean, it's just that I knew the movements. I knew how to make things happen. From training all the time. Being, I was ahead of the game. You like running and stuff. I was always ahead of the game. I was just there. In fact, when I got overseas, I had to teach hand-to-hand combat to the South Vietnamese kids, or the Mountain Yard kids too, and just basic stuff, make them feel confident, a handful of moves to make them feel like, yeah, I'm tough, I can do this. But, we did that. I did that Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Was that Pathfinder school at Fort Knox, Kentucky?
No, Pathfinder school was at Fort Benning.
Okay.
Because we went on to infantry. Now, here's what I want to get to, is infantry school. It was in Augusta, Georgia. And Rob and I went to infantry school together, AIT, Advanced Infantry School. And we got to a place, and it was beautiful, Fort Gordon. It was like really, it was like 5-star hotel, it looks like. It was beautiful. And this guy comes up in a Jeep. He said, you guys, you're here for, AIT. And we said, yeah, get in. We drove like 40 miles into the swamps. And he said, just stand here and get here. I'm going to go. And somebody will come and pick you up, take care of you. There were these Quonset huts. And there's a story behind it. And the place was called Camp Crockett. And I'm sure that you probably have come across people, or maybe they never bring it up. Going to Camp Crockett was so bad, we used to have flashbacks of it in Vietnam. And it was really horrible. I mean, it was like set up like being in Vietnam. There was always somebody trying to steal stuff and break into your thing at night. We had to take care of ourselves. You'd walk through mud puddles to go take a shower and walk through the mud puddles coming back. It was just horrid. You had one hot meal a day. And that was breakfast. And then on the weekends, you could get 3 hots a day. But Monday through Friday was like, it was hard. It was really hard.
So they were putting you under that kind of pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this place I don't know why they said it was like a failure. So they hid it. And there's a guy who wrote a letter and said, never heard of it, because he used to call all the time. Where's Camp Crockett? Where's this? Never heard of it. And he wrote a letter called Never Heard of It. And I can't even find that on the internet anymore. But he went through all that, and he went back there, and it's turned into a park. And he said, but if you look really close, you can see where they had the Quonset huts.
How long were you there?
Let me see. When was 8, 19, 11, 12? Probably 12 weeks, 3 months, maybe a little week longer. But it was intense. It was like there was no break. I mean, it was just constant.
How many guys were in your group when you were there?
Well, it was in the Quonset hut. How many guys? I don't know. It was the size of a company. We broke down in companies, and then platoon, and then squads, just like you did in Vietnam. And but it'd be the kind of thing like if you went out, if you go out on fake patrols, training stuff.
Yeah.
You would have guys looking for you to hunt you down, to capture you. And,
what would they do when they captured you?
Well, they'd put you inside of a cage, inside of a fake cage or something. So where you're in there and people are looking at you, mocking you, making fun of you. You got caught and stuff. And there were times when guys got lost. I was with this guy. I remember his name was Fitzpatrick, and we were doing our thing out in the woods. And I remember that when you learn stuff when you're a kid and you take that with you, we were like wandering, and we got stuck in this stuff. It felt like it was growing around you, and fighting it. And then you're on your back pulling at night, and you feel like it's literally trying to eat you alive.
Yeah.
Well, we got through that. He lost it, and not that he was a coward or stuff. He just lost it. And I calmed him down, and I said, look, we're going to have to go back that way because there's this water out here. It was like something you see in a sci-fi monster horror movie, the water and the trees dripping and stuff. And he said, no, man, we'll just swim. I said, look, you can't go out there, man. When I picked up a rock, threw it in, and all these water monsters came up. Man, I said, holy moly, man, it was just like something I learned that if I didn't learn.
You said most of the training's at night for you guys.
Well, train for Pathfinder school.
Yeah.
Pathfinder school was like 90% at night.
Yeah.
And the daytime stuff was paperwork, like mapping and stuff like that. By then I got a little bit better, but, people would help me. I'd help them with stuff.
And describe for people, if they haven't heard of Pathfinder, what does that entail? What does that do?
Pathfinder actually comes from the Native Americans, the American Indians.
What does a Pathfinder do in Vietnam?
Well, in Vietnam, Pathfinders were like they were like first responders in a sense. Like if a jet went down, if a jet went down or a helicopter went down, you'd go out and rescue. Only if it was like out there. One thing, sometimes these helicopters would go down and they would hook on the trees, big trees, and just hang there, and you'd have to rappel in. You learn how to do all that stuff.
You finish up Pathfinder school. Do you go over as a team or to the individual?
No, what's the thing about Vietnam is you went over alone and came home alone. It wasn't like my dad, you're on the boat for 3 weeks. You're talking out everything. No, it really was really hard.
Where did you land over there? Da Nang?
Oh, no, Tan Son Nhut Air Base.
Okay.
And which is like Cam Ranh Bay, Tan Son Air Base, and the Trang.
Yeah.
And we had formation. And I remember like I didn't have my hat. And this major said to me, where's your top? Where's your top? And I went and got my hat, put it on. We had formation, and it was like the numbers, I don't know, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 10, 20. Because I remember like 20-something, 22 guys were killed that day. And I had just been in country like a couple of nights, and they all went to the tarmac to load on these 2 helicopters, and I was with them.
That's what the formation was for.
Yeah. Formation for the thing in the morning.
Yeah.
All accounted for.
But then they were going to go do that.
And I just went with them. I don't remember if somebody told me to, or all I know is I got there and they were loading up and a Jeep pulls up and somebody got out and came over and asked an officer, and he said, who's private first class Mike Ferris Mineta? That's me. And so they said, okay, you go back with him. And I'm going like, wow, I knew they were going to a place I learned later was Phan Thiet. Phan Thiet is where Ho Chi Minh was born. That was his city, his little town. I mean, it was beautiful, but you couldn't go in there. You weren't allowed to, go in there because people would go in there and be gone missing. All these guys got in the helicopter. And I know like a couple hours later, the word came down, they were all shot down and everybody was killed. And that flipped me out. That kind of really like, whoa, wait a minute. I hear about guys getting shot, but this is like, it's like group.
It just became real.
It just became very real.
And how old are you? You're 19?
No, I was 20.
20.
Yeah, because I turned 21 over there and I turned 22 over there. And I was 20 years old. But I remember talking to these guys. Some officers, mostly lieutenants and majors, and there was a colonel. There were no full-bird colonels, but just one colonel, And it was really, and then that night, I went for the services for these guys, and I'm sitting there, and I'm looking out. It was an open thing, church, I'm looking out over here to one side, and I see all these people running around just working. it was towards dusk and stuff. And then I look over to the other side, and it was like there was like a canal with small little junks and people doing their thing and stuff. And I don't know, it hit me like really what I was there for. I hadn't even been in country 3 days, and all of a sudden I'm at something for like where 22 guys were killed. And you walk around wondering how the hell could that happen? What did they just do? Something in my mind was thinking they get hit and it just drops, And when you get in a helicopter chopper, they call it a Huey, and they sail, they'll be going like this, then they go boom like that, and the top of the world they call it treetop, and just sail. It was like these guys are driving racing cars, and they were like my age. But all I know is after that, I was assigned to a camp, Duklop Special Forces camp on the Cambodian border. And I was assigned to this camp. And I didn't learn too much later that other guys, I just thought everybody was assigned to it, but everybody went 101st, some went to 173rd, some went different places, as a Pathfinder. So I was with these guys, which was like a trip, a real.
How big was the camp?
Camp was small, man. It wasn't like, I'm trying to figure out.
Football field, maybe?
Oh, no, that would be huge. No, half of that.
Were you on a hill?
Yeah, it was on a small hill, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It was almost set up like a Roman camp. It really was. Triangle, where it was all set up and stuff. But, you had a lot of mountain yard people. You get them to come in and live with you. And it was like in that little camp, you'd have school for the kids. The kids are just like cute. Kids that you like would just get lost in the mixture. I can remember, I don't know how this happened, but I was sitting there one day. I took my name Mike, and I had it on I put it on my name tag, Mike, and this Vietnamese kid started talking to me. The lingo that you do when you're there.
Yeah.
And he said, same, Mike. And he showed me his shirt. He had a shirt on like me, and it said Mike. And I'm going like, wow. So I found out the kid was an orphan, let's just say. And he ended up at the camp where we lived at the Green Beret camp. And he'd hang out with me, be following me around and stuff. I'd go out, they'd come back in, he'd be there. If I got off the chopper, he'd give me a rifle and walk along like a cool little dude. But he got killed later. We would get, sometimes you got hit like every night.
With mortars and stuff?
Mortars and 122 rockets and stuff like that. Just to hassle you. And it was a hassle. It really was. And then every now and then you get artillery from Cambodia. The old Russian 88 guns. It's a pretty good sized gun, And then everything would it just changed everything. And then there'd be nothing. Maybe a little ground probe, maybe not. Nothing. For maybe weeks. Then you get really relaxed, and boom, it started to hit again. It was like psychological warfare, right? Yeah.
First mission.
Basically, still in the training, there was a small group of us, and the helicopter came in, dropped down the ladder, and it was like moving. Like this.
Yeah.
And they hook on, take it, hook on, take it. And somehow, I don't even know how, I thought I hooked on. I really did. And I hooked like this, and it went up, and I went down flat on my face. And the helicopter went up, and I sense things, and all of a sudden there was gunfire. And I just laid there. I froze. I didn't, at that point in time. And I was still in training. And anyway, what it was, I missed. They flew off, and I could still see the helicopter going through the valley like this, zigzagging to miss. And I realized I was, it was on my own, And I remember the first night, I would never say this, but I'll say it. I cried like a baby. I was freaked out. I was embarrassed because I messed up. And and then I realized something came to my mind. All of a sudden it said, let your training kick in. And that's what I did. And I stayed awake most of the night. I got a little bit of sleep, not much. But daylight, I head towards higher ground. And I did. I went to higher ground and I had a sense about where I was at, the north, the south, the west and stuff. And I just started heading one way. Um, then I came across a South Vietnamese unit, and then they took me back. I mean, I was freaked out at first. I see these guys at the Viet Cong, but I said, but their uniforms are too nice.
Were they freaked out when they saw you or no?
Well, a little bit, yeah. They asked me to hand and all that stuff that you see all the time in movies. Well, the first mission was we had to go in. The South Koreans needed a landing zone opened up, so we went in, and it was like a lot of hard work. It was so hot, so tiring, and we opened up things, a little place on top of a cliff, on top of a mountain, just to get this,
so they could land a helicopter
and take off. But there was one big ass tree that was growing out of the bottom, where you had to go down there, and we were out of explosives, and we were just saying, well, we got to get some on the first helicopter before it could take off. But it came in, I guess they had explosives because 2 Koreans came down to give me the explosive. Kind of filling in on the story. But I remember I went there with my axe. And then what happened? There was things like, boom, boom, and I realized I'd being shot at. And I'm hiding behind the tree, like cutting it at the same time. And out of the blue, I heard gunfire to my right. And I go, holy shit, I'm dead, But it was. I looked and I saw I saw Asian eyes, but then I realized they were Koreans.
Was the Koreans?
They were helping me, And I tell you something. When that tree went down, it opened up a hole. I can see where they couldn't go anywhere. They can only go so high. I don't know. I keep thinking, why don't you just go way over the tree? But it's the way they were designed and stuff and everything.
True about the South Koreans that they were hardcore.
Yeah, they were the kind of guys like if you helped them get into an LZ, if you say, "Can we spend the night with you guys?" No, you can't, because what they used to do, I heard stories, and I'm sure they did because I used to go over to their base and train with their karate guys. A couple of us on my team would go over there and train with them because being what I was, the black belt and stuff, and they called it, like in Japanese, it's a dojo. I think it was called a kwang or something, where they would train. It was a regular school and the officers and stuff, and they had a lot of respect for me, to come and do that. And the other guys that I talked into coming and doing it, train with them. But they were like really, they were hardcore, because there was a time when I was working with them. I don't remember what it was. I just remember these officers started kicking all the privates, kicking them. And I lost it. I just said, come on, stop it. He knocks my hand on him. He's an officer. Well, we got a little fisticuff, and, I could have gotten in a lot of trouble, but I didn't, and then I learned that that's their way. As an American, if somebody kicks you, you want to kick them back, But some people feel honored, I guess, to be kicked, But this guy and I, we went at it, and I don't know. I remember when they broke us up, there was a couple big ass lumps he had, and I figured I got him good. But he was an officer. I still could have got busted. But he probably had more respect that I did
that you stepped in. Just the day-to-day, what happened? Well,
day-to-day, okay, when you're in the bush, you never know what's going to happen. Okay, when you're out there, if you have a mission, you could get together on your mission and you talk things out. Here's what's going on. There's a chopper that went down. There's a jet that went down. Here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to do. You're going to do. And your secondary is you do that if you can't do that, etc. And you go out and you play by the book. You go out and do stuff. Now, the thing about going out there, you'd be assigned to destroy the helicopter, especially, blow it up, but you put all this white phosphorus on the panels, where there could be stuff that they could get, and you handle the wounded. I know that we had a guy on the team. He was now relatively really new, and his name was Blue, Blue, and he just he called him like that after that cartoon dog. I don't know where I'm gonna go today. And Blue was like that. He was from a small farm from Mississippi. And it was like, what are we going to do today? Anybody got any? And I'm going like, this guy went to Pathfinder school and everything, But we went out and we got a pilot. He was deceased. And he was pretty messed up from the jet fuel. You understand, jet fuel is like you don't burn and you don't really disintegrate, you melt. And we didn't have anything. We didn't have something to put him in, pilot. Why I don't know. We should have had, but we took him out, wrapped him up, covered him in the helicopter, like we're sitting. Okay, he's down here. And what happened was that the wind knocked the poncho back, and the fellow that died, his skin started to melt off his body, and it flew up and it all went right into Blue's face. And he was covered in this melted skin, and it's just the poor kid and the look on his face, and I forget that, but that's the kind of stuff that you get. What's that? What were you tried by fire, whatever it is, I mean, that was, I think, his first mission out. We had some hairy missions. We had some really interesting ones, especially when the helicopters get caught in the trees, and they're dangling on these big trees. There's a place called, I think it's still called the Hung Forest, and these trees are massive. It's like in the Bible when they talk about the trees of these cinder trees. They're so huge and strong. Well, these helicopters can get caught in these things, and they just dangle. And, you got to go in, and if the people are dead, you got to tie them up and let them pull out. You take the wounded people first, then the healthy, because the healthy, actually, you could have taken the healthy first, but they wouldn't go. They had too much. They were too proud, too much pride. Take the deceased first, and then we'll go. And then you gotta, and then you're left down there with you and maybe one or two other guys getting everything together. And when you get up to a certain place, you pop and then boom, it blows up. And, it's weird talking about this now. I didn't, it's just it's surreal now. If that's the right word.
Yeah.
It's like I can't.
Was it kind of, you were just in the moment when you were out there? So it was just like you were just taking care of business, and it was
I was taking care of business, being in the moment. It's just, yeah. I mean, when I'm sitting here talking about it now, and there's things that's going through my mind now. I can't even I can't grab it. It's going by so quickly. I don't talk about things. Not that I don't want to talk about it. It's that you just don't, you don't, find people want to know, did you kill anybody? It's not even about that. It's just fulfilling your responsibility and keeping yourself sharp, in a sense that, if you mess up, it could hurt somebody, it could kill somebody,
How often were you going out? Was it multiple times a day?
Oh, sometimes it could be multiple times a month, more than a day.
Okay.
And and the thing of what's interesting about that, a day, I've had experiences where you end up someplace and you have to go north now, maybe 50 miles this way, and you get there, you don't even really know what you're going to be doing. And then sometimes you're assigned, like once we were assigned to the 101st Airborne in first of the 506 in Fayette, and we would do recon stuff. And how would I put it? How can I put it? We're what we would do, we'd have a 6-man team, and we go out and then split to here, in which then what happens with that, you take the 2, 2, and 2, and you break up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this way, and you sense where the other person is, and you just observe. And if movement, you pass it on to this, and then it gets passed by to the other people that's behind to get prepared for whatever can come. Very, very seldom do you end up where there's like a lot of guys coming through. Usually it's just like you come across, a handful of guys walking around. And a lot of times a lot of these guys don't even know we're there. And just by the way they're walking, carrying their weapons and talking and chitter-chatting around, like that night that I got when I missed the hook, these guys were standing over me. I mean, not even from here, maybe here to the door, but they were chit-chatting and talking away and smoking. I could smell marijuana, smoking, giggling and stuff. And it just seemed like a lifetime. I just thinking like, what if they decide to stay here tonight? All this stuff's going through your mind, but it was instant. Boom, lit up on, let's go. And that was it. And I just started doing my thing. But
where'd you carry as a weapon?
M16. That's it. A lot of guys, they'd have a 45, have a K-bar, which is a knife. They'd have a 38 strapped to their foot. Yeah, I just carried M16.
What did you think of the M16?
It was okay. It was functional as long as it worked. It was the kind of weapon where they said you don't have to clean it.
They said you don't have to clean it?
Yeah, it was designed not to be cleaned.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Like one of my first weapons I had was a rarity. I had to turn it in. Was like, it had like the weirdest thing. This makes any sense. You could put it on 3 things: single shot, boom, 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 and then triple shot, where you pull the trigger and go boom, 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 and then full automatic, da, 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 But those jammed a lot, I heard. It didn't jam at me, but I just took it to the fire range, test it out. It worked fine, but for some reason, anybody that had their weapon had to turn it in and get a new one. And I just got the one automatic, but one fire or automatic, that was it. Thing of what it was, what I did learn about it, not through experience, by just learning, it would go so fast that the cartridges couldn't get out.
So it would end up jamming.
It would just that, and then you're trying to break it out. You see these. There used to get like a little tool, that you could carry, to get it out and stuff. I remember I met some guys over there, when we were at the back base at 101st, that had Tomahawks. And
what is that?
The Indians.
Okay.
At the time, they had them. Real ones were made, and they had that. They carried the Tomahawk and the K-bar,
to throw people and stuff?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was a pretty efficient. It was better than almost a knife. It was just to work with, cut. It had the tip on the end.
Yeah.
People go to basic AIT, even the Marines, but Camp Crockett was just like really bizarre. It was like really bizarre. I remember there was something that happened that I got an overnight pass. And, okay, this is weird to get an overnight pass at Camp Crockett. And I don't even know why I'm talking about this, but it's weird. But I remember like I had to be back in the morning, and they sent a cab for me, the CEO. And I got in, and the guy said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "Take me to an Italian restaurant." And he took me to this pizza dive, like in the middle of swamps, know? So I guess it's as Italian as I'm going to get, But I don't remember why I got that overnight pass. I can still remember it in my mind. I can still see the things that were going on. Anyway, Camp Crockett was like a really big proving ground. For people.
Clearly, they were testing you to see if you could hold up under.
Yeah, and it would be like there would some of the testing. I remember this. We had to do this obstacle trail, and I don't even know. I can't remember it that well, but it was an obstacle trail where this one guy he was like a little bit in front of me or behind me or next to me. I don't remember, but he was starting. It was a hard. If you ever did an obstacle trail, it sounds easy, but it's not. It's downhill, it's uphill, it's around hill, it's down, it's up, and you just lose it, and you get exhausted even when you're in great shape. And I just remember his face when he something happened. I don't know if he fell or what it was, but I went back to get him, you know. And so we went in together. I don't know why I'm telling this story. It was just something that, like, you realize. I think, oh, I know. Ooh. No, I realized what it was. It was just like something I learned about how the military trains you so well. When I was a kid in Tennessee in the summer times, we used to make slingshots. All right, and we shoot at sparrows and stuff. And I was like a little off, but one of my stones hit a sparrow. And he fell down, and my cousin Duke, he picked it up and said, "Look, y'all got this one here, you know." And I cried like a baby. You know, even now, if I kill a mouse, I'll cry. I cried like a freaking baby. You know, my cousin was, and people tried to pick on me. My cousin was big dude. He played football at the University of Michigan. So, to pick on my cousin, that's what he was like. And, the thing of it is, I can remember after I did all this training, and I came out here to California to hang for a couple of days with guys I was going overseas with. And we had shotguns. And we're walking around the desert, wherever I was at, in the desert. And I climbed up these rocks, and I'm sitting up there. And I'm like I'm now, and I had a shotgun like this. And something sat over here. And I went, whoops. I went, boom. And all these feathers flew by me. And I said, shit. The memory muscle, what that was freaked me out. I sensed it wasn't human. I just sensed it was like what it was. I wasn't worried about seeing a human or anything of a mistake, because it just was just boom. And that was I realized, my God, they do train you to kill. Oh, amazing, man. In that moment, did something to me. Before I even went overseas and stuff. And I was with some guys I knew. They all went separate ways. One guy I hung out with, he was from California, Italian kid. And we were on the plane. It was like a 22-hour flight, stop here, stop there. We were on the plane. And we landed in Hawaii. And the pilot said, well, y'all got like a good 4.5, 5 hour layover. Enjoy the beach, but be here on time. So Bruno, his name was Bruno, and he it was funny. He grew up with Dean Martin's kid that was killed. Bruno said, Mike, let's wait. Everybody's going to run off this plane. Got all the time in the world. Let's just wait. Let them get off, and we'll just rosy on off. Well, what happened? We were the last two, and this officer goes, you and you, stop. It's like, he gave me a briefcase. He put the chain around there, gave me a 45, gave him a 45, and said, see you in like 6 hours. It was no air conditioner. It was hot as hell in that plane. And we sat there looking at this briefcase. But I just
no other instructions.
No, just don't let anybody take this. It's just your responsibility.
Did he want to go to the beach? Is that what it was?
Well, I just wanted to get off the freaking plane. Get a nice fresh cup of hot coffee or something. I wasn't really a drinker, but no, it's just funny the way it worked out. Usually, like they always like the Army, it's like hurry up and wait. And but there's little things that happen like that all the time. It was there. I remember one time we were out. This sounds weird. It sounds like we didn't do anything but messing around. We were out, and we got on a roadside stand. We were on patrol, went on a roadside stand and started drinking Coke in little tiny bottles and eating bananas. He liked little green bananas. Man, like a few hours later, it hit us,
And a gut bomb?
Yeah, a big-ass gut bomb, man. People would get sick instantaneously over there. All of a sudden, dysentery would hit you. and you'd be crapping in your pants. I mean, it's embarrassing to say that, but it would. And it's the kind of thing that can kill you. You know, when guys do that, you kind of giggle, but you realize, man, another couple hours, the guy could be dead. It's like when I got malaria. I just kind of remember being sick and being really weak, and I was in the hospital with people that were, to me, were worse off than me. Really serious wounds.
How long out were you when you got malaria?
Oh, I was probably in for 8 months. I was probably in it for a pretty good while.
And you said before that, when we talked before, that they wanted you to take malaria pills, but most guys didn't do it.
Malaria pills, yeah, those things the size of a $50, you couldn't break it up. You had to swallow it whole, which it didn't make sense to me. It's going to break up. But no, a lot of guys took it I think I took it for like about a week. And I finally just forget it. I don't remember what happened, to tell you the truth. I just stopped taking them. And I think I said that it was like 2 weeks worth. I think it was like 8 days or something, It was uncomfortable. It was hard on the stomach, Yeah, but I think most guys, everybody did. Everybody said, yeah, I just stopped taking them. And some people got sick and some people didn't. No, it was a proven fact. Even if you took it, you could still get sick.
Right.
They had medicine then to help you recover from it, which is really interesting. A lot of people didn't know. I can remember when I was separated that time with the unit, remember the training, I ended up in this village. It was eerie. It's like I was going into a ghost town. And
just that no one was there?
Yeah, no one was there. It was dead. And what I come to find out, it was an abandoned leprosy colony that used to be there way back in the 40s, 50s, that period of time. And they moved them on, and that was like, I heard about that word of mouth from people when I got back. Said, I saw this thing in the mountains. They said there were a lot of places like that way high in the mountains to separate the people,
right,
I guess.
Right. How often did you interact with the locals, like in villages and stuff? Very often or not really?
Well, if they were at the camp, I wasn't, not, there were a lot of people that got involved in the inner circle. Okay. They had girlfriends.
Yeah.
Or else there were guys that would have a couple girlfriends and put them up in a room. I mean, a little apartment that would rent. So when they got a weekend pass, they go there and bada boom, bada bing and do their whole thing, And, yeah, there were guys like that. And I'm trying to think. My thing, what happened to me is like I got involved in a sense with a girl in China, in Hong Kong.
On R&R?
Yeah. And
how long out were you when you went on R&R?
Well, I went on R&R the first time. And, oh man, I was probably about 6-7 months in thinking, I'm trying to figure that out, but 6-7 months in. But all I know is I got there, and the first night I was there, you get off the plane, you go to this place, they size you up, come back in 2 hours, and they have a suit. Okay. And I got my suit, got the room, went out, and what are you going to do? You go in the place where all the GIs are, And I ended up in this place, and I just started smacking down gin, I think. I don't know, And I think and I got to remember, I was a virgin. I wanted to be a priest. Salute. I wanted to be a priest. I was a virgin, But I kind of ended up with this girl. And I remember we went back to the hotel, but when we got there, I said, look, I gave her some money. I said, you got to go. Okay. This is not going to work out. Because, I was like really bummed. I didn't want to, I kept my virginity until I was like 23, 24 years old.
Yeah.
Once I broke it, forget about it. I caught up. It's shameful to say, but then the next night I went out and I went to this place, and all these girls I was with a bunch of other guys, all these girls started coming over. And I'm going like, oh, it's going to be a routine of the night before, and I got, 5 days left, So out of the blue, this girl walks up to me, and she looked like something out of Central Casting. Drop dead gorgeous, just, I didn't even know women could be that beautiful. And her name was Lulu, and we became friends. And I spent the 5 days with her. And it was even a point that, I spent the 5 days with her. Her uncle owned this bar. And this guy started talking to me. He had that, Robert Conrad, the actor,
Oh, yeah, Robert Conrad? Yeah.
Okay. He had that look, and he worked for Air America, okay? And you see where this is going. He worked for Air America. We spent time talking together, that night and stuff. And after I missed my flight, I didn't know what to. People said, don't go to the government. Don't go anywhere. Don't go to, what do we have? We have
the embassies and stuff?
The embassies and stuff like that. So I'm like franticing out, man. What am I going to do? But what happened, I went into the bar, and Lulu was there and stuff. And we got talking. He said, you kind of, it came up that I was AWOL. And I said, yeah, I kind of missed my flight. He said, then you're AWOL. And I said, yeah, I made it like, well, it's okay. And he said, man, you don't understand. You're AWOL and you're in war. They'll hunt you down to the day they die, So he said, if I get you back in country, can you find your way back? Which is, if you understand about Vietnam, you could wander all over that place and find a ride, find this, find that.
Yeah.
It was just that open. And you wonder, like, well, how do people do that without the Viet Cong, So he got me back in country. I got in there, and even though I was like a day and a half, 2 days late for checking in, they just brushed it off. They just didn't want to deal with it. I guess I was doing a good job and stuff. And but the thing is that there was a couple things that happened over there that still haunt me to this day. The one thing was a kid, we were both the same age. Bill, his name was Bill. He was from Detroit, and he killed 2 people, Americans. He set up claymores, and in the process of killing the 2 people, he killed the wrong 2 people. He didn't kill the ones he went after. He went after his captain. I don't even want to say his name, but he went after his captain, and the captain gave this warrant officer, which is a pilot, after 2 years in Vietnam, say, sleep in my bunk. It's safe, okay? And where he slept, like you can see the hooches were like, he had these big canisters filled with sand, and he put like this and went down, and he just wiped the kid away, kaboom. And he set up the other one to hit, like, let's say the one first sergeant was here, the sergeant major was back there. I think he was after the first sergeant. And he kind of did it wrong where it went too high and went over and hit the sergeant major. So they both were killed.
That was on the base you were on.
It was the Dong Within base. And the interesting thing is, like, I don't know why they had me go escort him to jail, LBJ. I mean, I'm not an MP. I'm thinking of getting an MP to do it. Why me? But I remember we were like, we were on the road for like a day and a half. And I took him to LBJ, and I can still remember him going in, and these MPs were yanking him, boom, da. And he said, remember, write my mother and write my girlfriend. I think what you did that night.
He wanted you to write them.
Yeah, me to write them. Yeah. But then what had happened, I was getting ready to go on a mission, and we went over the planning like a lot of hours. But all of a sudden, these two big-ass MPs walked in and said my name. And yeah, it's me. And he said, well, you have to come with us. I said, for what? You have to appear at a court-martial. And I said, but I'm going on a mission. And he said, well, the court-martial basically has priority over your mission. Doesn't matter. You get filled. Which it did. I went to the court-martial. I had to get all cleaned up. I went in, and they asked me all these bizarre questions. I'll tell you something. You talk about being nervous. Man, I thought I was going to, if I said one wrong thing, I was going to die right there. And
what were they asking you?
They asked me, did you find drugs on him? What did you talk about? Did he say anything to you? Or did you check him for drugs? Just basic stuff like that, you know. And, you know, I just didn't care for some reason. I mean, this is like how many years later? It's 1969. And I just didn't care.
When you say you just didn't care, what do you mean?
Well, I didn't care if you killed him or not, tell you the truth.
I see.
It just didn't matter because, to tell you the truth, the one guy, the sergeant major, was a sweetheart. And I think he even knew that. This guy, he was a sweetheart. One of those old-time guys that talks about when I was 17, I was in World War II, and then I was in Korea, you know, and now it's top of the line, you know. And he'd do anything within reason, you know. But the sergeant, you know, was the top sergeant. It was the first sergeant was a real a-hole. And I remember the first sergeant like, yeah, what's wrong with these people? You know what I'm saying by these people?
Yeah.
And I'm going like, you know, I'm looking at a guy sweating like a pig, stinking of beer, and asking me what's wrong with these people. So you say, I shouldn't care. You know, besides starting to do drugs, doing the stuff you get your hands on anything over there. They just pushed this kid over the edge where he literally popped. And the thing reason why our team, we knew he did it, the guys in the team, which all kept their mouths shut, is because he put on tiger fatigues. Okay, now did he do that to make it look like one of us did it? You know, I just people dying and stuff. But you know, sometimes to look at somebody that got blown up or hurt bad and stuff didn't affect me as much as like standing on the back of standing in a place where you look over there and you see a major or a captain with his head down, and they're bringing off a body, but it's covered, and all you do is see his boots. That had more effect on me than looking at the actual person getting shot up or dead blood. You're right there. It was almost like the end of a movie. It was weird. But, you know, Bill used to come and talk to a lot of us. He was friends with everybody. He asked us all kinds of questions. You know, how do you do an ambush? And you in my mind, I'm thinking like, you know, doesn't everybody know how to do an ambush? And no, there's tricks to it. There's ways of doing it, but he asked everything, and he did everything by the book, as we told him. And the one thing you learn about doing it by the book is you don't do it by the book. You know, that's just to get you lined up.
Whatever happened to that guy?
Don't know. I dropped him off at LBJ, Long Bend Jail, and that was the end of it. Except when I went back to the court-martial. And
what happened after your court-martial?
Well, I was just going to, you know, that's what's really funny is that's what really pissed me off. And then I'm going like, is this going to be a mark against me? Am I going to walk around and these people are going to look at me like I did something wrong, you know?
Tell me getting hurt. What's that story?
Oh, this is like November 21st of 1969. I'm on the Special Forces Camp Duklac. All I know is I heard people say incoming. I started hearing like, boom. And that's the 122 rockets. They'll whiz, you'll hear it go, stop, and then boom. And it's like, I think it goes off like the size of a hand grenade. Then this day I can remember the sounds were different. And then I realized it was artillery.
Is this night?
Yeah, this is like dusk. I went towards the bunker. But the captain went in, CEO of the camp. A couple of Vietnamese Montagnard kids went in. And I went in, And out of the corner of my eye, I saw this one mountain yard kid that I knew. He slipped. And it was just like automatic. I went out and grabbed him and I yanked him in. And just as I hit like this, is when all of a sudden, boom. But what's really weird about that, just before I got hit, is what happened to me with fear. In that exact moment, I knew something was going to happen. Now, I don't know if this exactly is this, but the fear that came over my system, I never experienced before then or after then. And I had been in some serious car accidents. I had been involved in a boating accident where my friend and my friend's dad died. I didn't even have that kind of fear come over me. And it was just like, I know when you see people and when you see things, you just think you're going to fall apart.
And you had this fear a beat before you got hit.
A beat before. That's what's really weird. And it's just like, because right after the beat, the next thing I knew, I was laying there back and I looked up and I could hear the rounds coming and it was direct hits. How did they know how to do direct hits on that bunker? I thought about that later. How did they know? There's some people in the camp. They measure it out and they tell you, and they might even have a walkie-talkie saying, like, the captain's in that tent. He's in that bunker. When they say not trust anybody, you just don't trust anybody. You say when you get home, you're like that. You get really fearful. I don't even know what I could do to make that feeling come over me again. I don't know, was I supposed to die and I didn't? Did my number come up and something brought it back down?
Where did you get hit?
I got hit, basically what I got hit, like here, cracked my jaw, cold teeth here.
All those teeth were gone?
God, yeah. And they the military, they do stuff. I didn't leave camp. What's weird is that was November 21st, and they couldn't even get me. Well, I don't know if it couldn't get me out. I say they couldn't get me out, but I didn't get out till like December 1st. Then the morning of December 1st, papers come through. You're going, okay, I got a helicopter. Went back to the base camp, but then the sergeant came over and said, we're going to just sleep in your bunk tonight. We'll get you to the hospital in the morning. The next morning, this guy that I knew, this kid from El Paso, Texas, big Mexican kid, sweetheart guy, came in and he said, Dutch and Bill, he used to call him Red because he had this flaming red hair. They were all killed. And I go, wow. And they were killed like 10 minutes before midnight, December 1st. That mortar pit was Dutch and Bill and me. That was our mortar pit. That we did together. I just, for years, it haunted me. I always thought it was December 2nd. And it wasn't. It was December 1st, before December 2nd.
So what happened to you? They shipped you out?
They did in time. Basically, I was getting close anyway. I think if I didn't get hit like that, I think I would have been able to stay over there till February or March. So I ended up going home between Christmas and New Year's. And that's even the bizarre time, man. On New Year's, I got home. And there's nobody at the airport. I think my mother forgot. I don't know. So I called up a friend of mine, and he picked me up. That was his name. I'm forgetting these people's names. I knew these kids, and he picked me up and took me home. I still had problems. I had fake teeth. Big ass bridge. That was God, I hated it. And I got home. And I'm looking at the wall, and I thought I was having a flashback. Which I don't even know what a flashback is, to tell you the truth, because there was blood over the wall. And what had happened was my mother and her husband got into a tiff. And she took out a butcher knife, man. And one thing about my mother, she put the butcher knife in her hand, run. because I've seen her like threaten my other dad, my stepfather, like, and she sliced him up, bam, 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 with blood splatting out everywhere. And I just come in and I'm seeing this stuff in my own home, I don't think I ever told anybody. I mean, the kids were all young now then, but that was bizarre, What, there was something else I want to talk about. I mean, there was a helicopter, a guy, I forgot it, they called him Pappy. And I kind of met Pappy later on, and he knew my sergeant was a full-blood Native American, and he believed in the Cheyenne guys. He's telling us stuff. And he was a great guy. He was my sergeant. He was I remember last time I saw him is what had happened is that, and these guys came out and they said, we need Mike. Well, come with us. So which one? Tarbell or Minetta? And I said, we don't know. So they took us both in. Why didn't you just call us up? We took us both in. And I can remember we got off the helicopter and he got off and somebody walked up to him and talked to him and his head went down. And last time I saw him was him walking off like into the sunset. And that was it. I never saw him again. And then from then on, we started getting other people in charge of our little team. We had one guy that was he went into the Army after working with the CIA and became a first lieutenant, and he took over the team. He was great because he did all the Sneaky Pete stuff. He knew all this stuff. We'd go out on all these missions and stuff. Sometimes missions people didn't want to do. When you're in situations like that, when you're over there, I don't know if other people feel like this, but you can become a bit of an a-hole. You can start to turn on people, not knowing you even turning on people. You just think this is the norm. I just talking about the lieutenant. His dreams was we'll be together, and he was from the West Coast, and we'll get together every now and then and have a reunion at my beach house. And, you just wonder why, why was this so, why was that? I wouldn't, if I was back in the world, I wouldn't have done that. I don't do that kind of stuff. I don't do that. I don't do that kind of stuff. And you find yourself doing that kind of stuff. And I tell you, so you put your guard way up and then you bring it down, but you don't bring it down, you bring it way down. And then somebody messes with you, you bring it way back up, right beyond that mark.
Goes extreme.
And it's like, when does it end? You wonder why. I was married 4 times. I had three little beautiful girls with the one lady. And the first one, I just bolted. I just couldn't take it anymore. I knew what was going on. I mean, I have a sense, but I bolted. And my brother was beaten to death in a parking lot. And I would go back and forth to Michigan up until the day he passed away. And she just treated well, let's get over it and move on,
Your wife?
Yeah, at the time. Yeah, my first one. Just get over it, move on, you got to grow up, they throw the lines like, well, aren't you Army? Aren't you infantry? Yeah, okay. So, I mean, I literally did. I shut down for several days. I didn't talk nothing. She couldn't get me to say nothing. And one day I just left, and then I rebound, a stupid rebound. I mean, well, we're still friends. I haven't seen her, but I know we'd be friends to this day. And it was annulled. The dad had it annulled.
When you came home, did you tell people you were a nom, or was it the kind of thing where you kept that to yourself?
No, I didn't even, it wasn't even like I thought about keeping it to myself. I just did. I didn't even think about it. It's just weird. When guys used to come home, I remember guys coming home from Korea as a kid. The whole neighborhood, hey, Johnny, where'd you go? You been? How you home? That didn't happen. You came home, and I remember one time I came home and I was only home a few months, a couple of months. And I went out, and I was always young looking. I went out and I bought glue to I don't know what I wanted. I had a little model car I wanted to build or plane. And the woman said, can I see some identification? And I was like, what? You know, what, I look like 12? You know? Just little things like that. You know, I can remember walking down the sidewalk and a woman was in front of me, and she's an old lady walking slow, you know, and she turns and she looks at me and said, here, you go ahead so I can pounce on your heels for a while. You know, I just wasn't ready for this stuff. I mean, I was a distance away. You know, I wasn't going to walk up on her and go around. I was going to wait till I got to the end because the sidewalk was here and it was just mud puddles everywhere else. I got to stop it.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff, it's just, I wasn't ready for the real world.
Yeah.
You know, and I you know, so I thought maybe when now it's like 1974, I separated from the first wife, and second, the time-wise, it seemed like everything happened in one day, all this stuff. But I remember I started going to see this guy, a psychiatrist, yeah. And he said to me, like, after I've been with him for like once a week, then for 6 months, he said, I'd like you to come to my group. Be really good for you. And you know what's really funny? I really didn't talk about Vietnam to him. I talked about my childhood and the stuff that I went through. You know, with a lot of that stuff haunts me more than Vietnam does.
Yeah.
But I was in the group, and I should have said that before, but I was in the group, and we introduced, and after I said, you know, Mike Social, you know, and he said, I just want to share with everybody, you know, Mike was in Vietnam. And out of the blue, this girl, like 22 years old, blonde-haired girl, literally jumped out of the chair and spit on me and started telling me I was a coward that I didn't go to Canada, that I went and I fought that dirty war, you know? And when the group finished, I never went back.
What did the psychiatrist do?
He kind of said, look, you know, that way, he just said, this is not right. I mean, I don't remember what he said, but I know that he, as being the leader of the pack, he had to say something.
Yeah.
But I can remember her, man, like, oh, man, she was just, I mean, they were like, yeah, things over there. I had the first firefights I was kind of in, I was working with a South Vietnamese unit, you know, and I was kind of on point with the guys, and they went over a hill, and they connected with somebody, and all of a sudden, the weapons, I could hear boom, 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 boom. So I kind of got down. I take a few steps, get down, take a few steps. After this all happened, I said to the veterans, I was still doing this. And I said, man, I remember something when I was in Tennessee. I used to what they would do, they say, roll up your sleeves when you're in the back of a truck with all this hay and stuff. It's good for you, but don't worry about the sweat bees. Okay, I'll make it tough. No, they were bullshitting with what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I was getting bit and stuff, but I'd be like, you know. And I'm going like, why are these sweat bees attacking me during a firefight? The guy says, what do you mean sweat bees? I see I'm going, it's going, so I'm like, those are bullets. He said, if you can hear it, you're still alive. It's gone. The sound, he said, the bullet passed, and then the sound catches up. And I like, holy shit, man. I'm like thinking of sweat bees. There was another time when I was walking with the unit. I worked a little bit with South Vietnamese unit, and we came upon this road, how we got on it, and it was me and 2 and 3, so 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. And right in front of us was like a Viet Cong. Yeah, maybe 4 or 5 guys came around, and we stood there. It's weird because, like, I don't know why I thought this, but I remember standing there, looking at these guys, and my thought was like, is this what it felt like at the OK Corral? You know? And then it happened. Boom, 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 you know? And the bullets went by. One kid was hit leg or something. They took out a couple of guys, but they ran. But that stuff would happen. I'd have these thoughts.
What's your take on all that? It's for you.
Well, my honest take was, I'm just sorry that I didn't connect with my uncles more. Because after the war, I was a certain age.
Would they talk much about the war?
Uncle Reuben would. He would, because he was back in his country, basically.
Yeah.
As an American soldier. Uncle Ted was like, he's a farmer where he talked more time with Scarecrow, And Uncle Richie just like, my mother, they used to make fun of him because he would just get drunk and dance without moving his feet. And he was this great looking guy. He looked like something like out of the 50s, like a detective, But my Uncle Reuben would, because he always said, kind of said that, he said, I'm telling these stories, but I feel one day you're gonna need them. Like, there's always going to be wars and rumors of wars and wars among wars. And look how much has happened since then. Like I'm saying, like I say too, there are people that take an interest in Vietnam. And you got to realize the mindset. I mean, when somebody takes an interest and they pick on My Lai and they misjudge, and what happened with My Lai was awesome, was horrible. But what people don't realize, it was just a handful of guys that did the shooting. And a couple of the guys that started the shooting were like real schmucks. The kind you find back in the world, you're not going in a bar and have a fisticuff with. And there were the other side of guys, okay, that were like, don't do this. But we're not talking of numbers like 5 or 6, 6 or 7. We're talking of numbers like 100, 200, 100, 300, ready to go to war. Because this guy, he was an officer, and he couldn't stop it. And he called up a friend of his, I'm kind of getting the story right, who was a gunner on a helicopter, a Huey. God darn it.
You're okay. It's okay.
On a Huey. He was a gunner. And he called him, can you come in? I need your help. And the guy came in with the Huey. And you can check this story out, just to make sure. But all I know is that he took the Huey and he put the 60 on the bad guys. And I guess something went down like, I'm going to have them open up if you don't stop. And they stopped. By then a lot of damage was done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you go through training telling these guys to cut your throat, to cut you to sleep, to do this. It was even like something I learned. I mean, I've heard, might have been on TV or something, but the Claymore mines. All right, the French says towards the enemy. The Viet Cong would sneak in and they turn it around while you were sleeping and right in front and turn it around where they face towards the enemy facing towards you. So when you went, boom, you blew yourself up. That's how slick they were. That's what they were like. But you live in that environment and you hear these things and then you're fresh. I mean, your wrinkles haven't even started in your clothing. And you're in the bush and you're hearing about guys getting shot and snipers and booby traps. There was a guy, he passed away some years ago. Brian kind of knew him. I think he did, but he was like 18 in World War II. And then he was a paratrooper in Korea. And then he was a paratrooper in Vietnam. He had 21 guys on his team, and he would say, this almost would make you nuts. He said, out of the 21 guys, 19 were killed or wounded by booby traps. Not even by gunfire. I know this, we had this guy that was really sweet. He had a German Shepherd. And they would patrol the fence and stuff. The dog, we heard a boom one day, kaboom, and the boom came that the dog blew up, was killed. And we had a little funeral for the, that was really sweet, but he was like a soldier, I was mentioning that story, say something on a high up, and when I told you about, we were in Fayette, and yet, Fayette was huge. It was 6,000 guys there. There were tanks. There were trucks with 50 calibers. It was everything. There was an area that was all gunships and over there, and in fact, Fayette was built by POWs from World War II. The Japanese camp and the Americans built it. And just the scale of it. And there was that 200, it had to be 200 feet, a 200-foot tower. The reason I say it had to be because I watched a movie a couple of days ago in this big tower, and I realized it was a 200-foot tower because where it was located, out that way, you had the ships and stuff, Fayette used to do patrols on the beach and stuff. And, when we stayed there, we'd offer our services. It sounds weird, but, can you patrol the beach? Because we got problems there. We would. During the day, people out there swimming. This big-ass tower, and this old guy came walking by, big, sweet smile on his face. Like, it looked like he worked there. Was on his way home to Fayette. And, everybody's cheering him and stuff. And he walks in by and hears people, Papa San. He went and he blew up the tower. And it was hysterical because it was like something that you got to remember this moment in case you get to use it in a storyline or something. We looked and we heard boom. And then everything was quiet. It was like, wow. And then it went, and it fell. Everybody cheered for that guy. We realized the guy's probably saying, I'll go in and I'll blow it up and give me my stripes, I remember that guy. He was so sweet. Everything's locking up on me.
Oh.
This happens because of my back.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens in the morning. I start to get convulsed, my legs. Then I read this. I was watching this thing like, when your legs start going, you got 2 or 3 years left in life. And that's good to know. My hips, my femur bone, and my knees, it's all titanium.
Wow.
It's all been replaced. I got scars over here, like deep, they had opened me up so many times on this side that I remember they tied me up with metal. And I can remember like I was in the hospital after this one surgery and it was burning. It was like somebody's taking a hot poker and pushing it into me. And I said, you've got to give me something. They become strict about that. And this goes back a few years. I started having my surgery 2017. So between then and 2018, I went through a lot of physical stuff. But even that far back, they're like slow and give me something. And I finally said, if you don't give me something, I'm leaving. I'm out of here. And I mean, I wasn't faking it to get shot up, but it helped me sleep, but it still burned and hurt.
Yeah.
But it helped me relax.
Well, thanks, brother.
My pleasure.
Thank you for sharing.
I hope I did okay.
You did great. Thank you so much.
There's a lot of stuff that came out today I have never talked about.
I appreciate you sharing, man.
Never, man.